So we are very fortunate to have Mike McLeod with us. He worked with our faculty last month at our faculty meeting, and it was incredibly informative to the point where as soon as he walked off campus, John and I were like, and so when are we bringing him back to talk with families? We do this thing, educating young people. It takes a team, you, us, and it's really important that we get to share this with you as well. All right, so now who is this guy? In 2016, Mike created the Internal Skills Executive Function Strengthening Model, and GrowNOW ADHD was born. His mission, improve quality of life for youth and families facing ADHD and executive function challenges. He's presented this model to audiences nationwide, internationally, providing specialized support in ADHD, executive functioning, social executive functioning, and parent coaching. With more than 20 years of experience, a master's degree from Lehman College, and collaborations with leading doctors, neuropsychologists, and nonprofits, Mike blends deep expertise with a practical, strength-based model that gets results. With no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Round of applause for Angela, everybody.
I did it. I did the hard thing.
Incredible introduction. Awesome. So let's get right to it. I know we started a little late. My name is Michael McLeod, the owner of GrowNOW ADHD. One of our offices is literally a 5-minute walk over there right on North Jackson Street. We've been here in media since 2015. We have an office in Berwyn, Los Angeles, New York, Lancaster, North Carolina, and we work with families all across the country and internationally. And it is such a privilege to be back at Media Providence Friends School. I had such a great experience working with the staff, incredible people, so engaged, so eager to learn, so friendly and so kind, and it was just incredible. So I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. So very, very excited. There's my daughter Eden. I always give her a shout out. That's her when she first sat up. She's 5 years old now, but it's one of my favorite pictures. Okay, so very quickly, I'll just run through this real quick. We did a year-long research study on the GrowNOW model at the Stratford Friends School in Newtown Square back in 2016. And here is a nice list of the sources and the references. Dr. Russell Barkley, of course. If you have a child with ADHD, executive functioning challenges, you have to know who Dr. Russell Barkley is. Remember that name. Sarah Ward, Ryan Wexelblatt, who's my podcast co-host on the ADHD Parenting Podcast. So if you do have a child with ADHD, check out that podcast on Apple and Spotify and everything. And today we'll be talking about the most up-to-date research on ADHD and executive functioning, and it's really from these two groups right here, and of course, CHAD. So whether you have a child with ADHD diagnosed or not diagnosed, this information will still apply to you, because we're going to talk about executive functioning as a whole, and also ADHD. So whether it's diagnosed or not, I will make sure everything still all applies. So when we all know that the home of executive functions when it comes to the brain is the prefrontal cortex right here behind the forehead. So we know this prefrontal cortex is the home of executive functions. It is the last part of the brain to develop because the brain develops over the first 30 years of life. It is not until you are 30 years old when you have your full cognition. You have your brain at its peak because it takes 30 years of relationships and experiences. The more different things you can do, the more relationships and social experiences you can have to build that prefrontal cortex. And what do we know about today's youth when it comes to relationships and experiences? Exactly. They're not quite having it like we all did when we were kids. So whether it's diagnosed ADHD, which is hereditary, you are born with it. Screens do not cause ADHD. Screens are not going to make you neurodiverse, but we do know they do create ADHD symptoms that can go away after a detox. So overall here, we do see that executive functions overall with this youth are lagging overall. So this is really applying to all. So here within the prefrontal cortex of the ADHD brain, we see that there are 5 specific regions that are affected in structure, function, and development. And the brain will develop slower, it will be structured in a more disorganized way, and it will function in a more chaotic way. And the same parts of the brain within these 5 function and development that are impacted by ADHD are the same areas that deal with emotions, self-awareness, and self-regulation. Then we have the limbic system, the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, much smaller in ADHD. Where are my ADHD parents in the house? Okay, so for those of you who raised your hand, would you agree that there is an emotional aspect to ADHD? There you go. Even though we look in the most recent edition of the DSM, the Diagnostic Standards Manual, of all of the criteria you need to hit to be diagnosed with ADHD, how often are you going to see the word emotions listed in that criteria? 0 times. You're going to see a lot about hyperactive kids who can't sit still and inattentive kids who just daydream, but nothing about emotions. And you ask any ADHD parent anywhere, it's all about emotions. And then we have the anterior cingulate, where we make our social and emotional decisions. Much less activation with ADHD. So now all of a sudden there's a social component to ADHD. Would you all agree with that? Absolutely. And we still have very powerful doctors and neuropsychs telling parents, oh, only take meds on school days. It's just to take notes and pay attention and get good grades. Don't give it to them on the weekends. Don't give it to them in the summer, right? Because we have to recognize this is not just an academic-based disorder. This is a true independent disorder in all areas of life. So with the power of this prefrontal cortex, we have to fully understand here is that the prefrontal cortex is truly what separates human beings from all other living species. We have a prefrontal cortex, we have an executive system, they don't. So this is truly what makes humans human, with the power of our executive system. And with this prefrontal cortex, human beings are the only species on this planet that can sustain a behavior over time in the absence of a direct consequence. So what does that mean? We have the ability to put in the work right here in the now today, even though the fruits of that labor might not affect us until months or years down the road. So for example, we can start applying to colleges and filling out the Common App, letters of recommendation, getting our essays, years before we ever step foot on a college campus. We can start preparing to get our driver's license years before we ever sit in the driver's seat of a car. We can work towards health goals, fitness goals, social goals. We can work towards all sorts of goals and put in the work today, even though we're not going to feel the benefits of that work until later. And that is what executive functioning is all about. And we have this because this executive brain, this prefrontal cortex, gives us the ability to pause, to stop, to not do what we would have done on impulse, to stop self from what we would have done on impulse. There's that word impulse that's so synonymous with these kids, right? Because they're missing this pause, stop, and think feature. And it's not stop and think, it's stop, visualize what needs to happen, make a mental movie of past experiences that were similar, visualize what the future might look like, and talk to yourself to make that mental movie come true, and then do. It's all an internal system of checks and balances, an internal system to keep you regulated, keep you motivated, so you're not reliant on mom, dad, teacher, everyone to be your frontal lobe for you. If you have a child with ADHD in your house, you're probably the executive functioning system for the entire family, aren't you? And it's pretty unsustainable, and it leads to parenting burnout. And teachers report every day, I'm repeating directions over and over and over again. They need so much help. They need so much hand-holding. In the public schools, we're seeing massive 504 plans with every accommodation in the book because so much accommodation is needed, so much hand-holding is needed, and the independence is not there. So we're missing the ability to pause, stop, and think, and aim our behavior towards that future. Because with the power of this prefrontal cortex, we have the ability to not only create motivation, but sustain it over time, even though there is a delay towards that consequence, whether it's a positive or negative consequence. And how does the youth of today deal with a delay? Not well. Not well. But we all know the power of delayed gratification, one of the greatest predictors of success of all time. executive function skills are the greatest predictor of success for human beings. Not your grades, not your GPA, not your diploma, not your homework or how clean your room is. It's your executive functioning skills. Your ability to delay gratification is the greatest predictor of success. Because executive functions are what allow you to move out of your parents' house, get a job, keep a job, make friends, keep friends, pay the bills. Not your grades and your memorization of academic content and putting it onto a test. It is these academic skills. And executive skills become more and more important as kids get older and parents are expected to do less and the kids are expected to do more. How's that working out? It brought you here on a Thursday night. So there you have it, okay? So we got to figure this out. So here's a list that teachers created for me before they received any training from me of what they thought lagging executive functioning skills looked like. So take a look through this list and feel free to shout out what you see in your house and what drives you completely insane.
Do you mind if I take
Take as many as you'd like, yep. And I'll also make sure that I'll send Angela the slides and make sure everyone gets them as well. Task completion, there you go. So this right here is the list created by teachers before they learned the most up-to-date research, where it shows they were still thinking of ADHD and executive functions as just these external, behavioral-based, academic-based problems. But now, based on the research we now have, the two biggest red flags for kids 18 and below are these two things right here. When you find that every single day, or most days, they wake up, they go to school, they come home, they stay home. And the vast majority of their childhood, the vast majority of their adolescence is the walls of the school and the walls of the home. Very little varied experiences. They don't truly have that third place like we all had as kids. Whether it was a sport, a club, an activity, music, whatever, a religious place, whatever it may be. It's just home and school. And their entire identity is school, where I feel less than, and home, where it's nothing but fights and arguments and prompts, and maybe screens. Okay? So when there's this lack of varied experiences, that's a problem. And then a lack of diverse face-to-face social experiences. Maybe the vast majority of their social relationships now are Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft, Snapchat, which we all now know are not real social experiences. They're marketed as social experiences, but that's pure false propaganda. The social experience, the social parts of the brain don't even light up when they're doing those things. There's what better way to sell a product for a child than to tell the parents this will give them a social advantage. This is a social experience. If you don't buy this for your child, they are going to be at a disadvantage. Fear-based marketing, and it's worked pretty well, hasn't it? Right? So we know that those are not real experiences. Screens actually make kids more antisocial, hence the in the house, in their room, by themselves behind closed doors for hours and hours. Not real social experiences, makes them antisocial. So the lack of experiences and the lack of social relationships really negatively impact executive functioning development. And here's a great image here from Dr. Russell Barkley to help us really understand the ADHD executive dysfunction brain. So the back of the brain is where humans store their knowledge, their IQ, their information, right? They memorize it, they know what to do, they have the information. And the front of the brain is where we perform, where we execute with our executive functions. So we have the knowledge and we perform with that knowledge and we show the world what we know. So for example, a teacher can take her class down to the library for library class. She can pull the one kid aside who's a little, hyperactive or whatever, pull him aside and say, hey, when you go into that library, you have to be quiet. You have to be quiet. Can say it to him 20 times. The kid can repeat it back to the teacher 20 times. What is most likely going to happen when the teacher opens the door to that library and the child goes inside? Are they going to be quiet? No, they're not. Was it a question of knowledge? No, it was not a question of knowledge. They knew what to do. They know that library equals quiet. They just could not perform. They couldn't perform in real time in the natural environment. They couldn't show what they know. And what do we now know about a little bit over 50% of kids with ADHD? They actually have an above average or gifted IQ. These are the kids that hack their school Chromebooks. They're playing Minecraft all day in class, and they still get pretty good grades, right? But how are they doing with life skills, independent skills, outside of memorization of facts? So the IQ is there. It is the performance that is the problem, the executing, right? So in the past, both ADHD and executive functions were looked at as this external behavioral-based disorder. Everything was based on what we can see with our eyes. With ADHD, it was all hyperactive kids who can't sit still. They have ants in their pants. They're running around everywhere. They can't sit during circle time. And it was all about inattentiveness, kids who just daydream and look around all day and are spaced out. And the same with executive functions. It was all time management, organization. Messy backpacks, messy folders, messy bedrooms, that's it. So it was heavy focus on just school. ADHD will affect you at school, and executive functions are skills needed for school, which is very outdated information. And it led to the rise of all these wonderful things right here, all these external behavioral-based Band-Aids, that the sticker charts, the reward charts, the timers, the wristwatch, things that don't move the needle, that don't help. And this huge rise of executive functioning coaches that will come to your house and help your kids clean out the backpacks, clean out the folders, sit with them while they work on their laptop to make sure they don't have 75 different tabs open at once, to make sure they're not sneaking YouTube during homework time. And then what happens when the clock hits the end of the hour and that coach has to go home to their own family? You now have an ADHD child who is highly prompt dependent on a very expensive adult because the internal skills were not strengthened, just an external Band-Aid. And things have gotten so crazy for ADHD parents spending so much money, so much time on treatments that are just not evidence-based, that the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC a few years back sent out an all-points bulletin to remind parents what's evidence-based and what is not. Talk therapy, counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, occupational therapy, these are not evidence-based treatments for executive functioning if you are 19 years and below. But most people still think, let me get him to go see a therapist. Let me get him to go see a counselor. Let me get him an OT. There's a great website called effectivechildtherapy.org where you can choose any diagnostic label from the DSM and it will list all of the things that are actually evidence-based. And these are not evidence-based treatments. The number one most evidence-based treatment for executive functioning is parent training. Because remember, it's a performance disorder at the point of performance. Like that example of the child in the library. It's the same thing with talk therapy. To think I can send my child to go talk to a therapist in his office or on Zoom for an hour a week, 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week, whatever it needs to be, then after that session, they're going to come home and want to be on their screens less, and they're going to want to do non-preferred tasks more, and they're going to want to scream and argue with mom less. That's not going to happen. Because remember, they're not going to take what they're learning and then utilize it because it's a performance disorder. Just like the young boy who knew, I have to be quiet in the library, but couldn't do it because he was at the mercy of his impulses. So the concept of talk therapy, not helpful. So parent training, teacher training, the number one recommendation. Medication management for kids 6 and up, 7 and up when applicable. But we have to focus on the internal long-term skill building instead of just accommodations. We look back on the past 10, 15 years of education. We have eliminated natural consequences. Dr. Russell Barkley has the famous quote, if you want to see an ADHD child fail, put them in an environment with no consequences. And we've done that in many ways, how we've changed schools. And we've seen 504 plans go from 5 pages to 50 pages. IEPs double in size, triple in size. And we've done this with anxiety, executive functions, over-accommodated these kids. And now we see we're currently in, as we'll discuss later, we're currently in the worst youth mental health crisis of all time. And it's also the same generation that has received the most therapy, the most counseling, the most socio-emotional classes at school. They've learned how to label their emotions, and they learn these things in school. But they're still the most depressed. So what is wrong? What are we missing? Okay? So what we have to do here is break down exactly what these internal skills are, because we're going to move away from hyperactivity, move away from inattentiveness, move away from time management, organization. What are the true internal executive functioning skills? The first is self-awareness, the very first executive skill to develop when they're little tiny babies. And they start to recognize, hey, wait a second, when I cry, what happens? There you go. The easiest question you'll get tonight. When a baby cries, what happens? I get attention. They hold me, they sing to me, they kiss me, they hug me, they change me. I get milk, whatever it may be. And they start to recognize, I have an effect over my world. I can do things that change the world around me. I can do things that affect me. So the very first executive skill to develop, we become self-aware. But over time, this becomes one of the most delayed skills. And we tend to see this in the middle school years when their lack of self-awareness now affects them socially and the ability to make friends and keep friends. Because it's no longer elementary school, we're all friends, we're all family. Middle school is when kids start to have their groups and their cliques and their groups of friends, and the lack of self-awareness can really impact them. And that's the real heartbreak of ADHD, of incredibly socially motivated kids just can't find the ability to keep those friends due to the lack of self-awareness and perspective-taking skills. So self-awareness, number one. Number two, self-regulation. Probably the reason you're all here tonight, right? So Dr. Russell Barkley describes ADHD not as attention deficit disorder, he describes it as self-regulation deficit disorder, because that's really what it's all about. It's not hyperactivity, it's the inability to regulate your body. It's not inattentiveness, it's the inability to regulate your mind. And the big push now is to change ADHD to EFDD, Executive Functioning Developmental Disorder, because ADHD is not an attention disorder, it is the preeminent disorder of executive functioning. And it's all self-regulation. The ability to regulate your emotions, your language, your body, your behavior in various environments towards various stimuli. Then, of course, we have self-motivation towards non-preferred tasks, towards any task that does not offer instant gratification. So for the youth of today, the ability to motivate yourself towards anything that's not screen-based, not game-based, not entertainment-based. Then we have self-evaluation, the ability to learn from past experiences and apply it to the present moment. And all of these skills, I refer to these as the 4 pillars. The foundation is self-language and the internal GPS, which is that stop, think feature. Stop, visualize, talk to yourself, and then do. So for decades, we focused on external organization, external time management, messy backpacks, messy folders. But think about it, you're gonna have a messy backpack unless you're first self-aware that that's even a problem. Then you have to be able to regulate and motivate enough to do that incredibly boring task of cleaning a backpack. Then you have to be able to self-evaluate and realize, hey, in 2 periods I have science, and she's gonna say, take out your lab notebooks. Everyone's gonna do it right away, but I'm gonna be the one person with dirty, crinkled papers. I'm not gonna like the way that feels, so I better do something about it now. So we did all these external band-aids for years when it was a lack of these internal skills founded upon the lack of that internal GPS. And that nonverbal stop and think feature allows us to learn from the past, visualize the future, our memories, and our imagination. Executive functioning is a fancy term for your imagination, because all executive functioning is the ability to visualize things in your mind and work towards that image. That's independence. And how do we develop our imagination? When we play, when we're bored, and when we're persevering through struggle. And what have all of us adults stolen from childhood today? Play, boredom, and struggle. Hence, the youth mental health crisis. Okay? Good? No, I didn't know. There you go. We're just getting started, guys. Okay? so there are 3 zones to executive functions. Of course, there's academic executive functioning, which we all know about. Being a good student, getting your work done, turning it in, following the rules, all those kinds of things. And for decades, we thought executive functions were skills needed for school, and ADHD will affect you at school. But now we know that school is not even the place where the majority of symptoms are seen. Where do we see the majority of ADHD symptoms? In the home. Home executive functions. You ever call your child's teacher and describe the way your kid is at home, and they say, are we talking about the same kid here? He's an angel here. We don't see those problems. Home executive functioning is number 1, self-regulation towards parents, self-regulation towards siblings, and the ability to initiate, persist, and complete non-preferred, non-screen-based tasks in the home. So the ADHD brain, very black and white and rigid, responds best to structure and condition. And that's what school is. School is structured with conditional relationships. Home is unstructured with the only 2 unconditional relationships. And the black and white ADHD brain does not comprehend this beautiful concept of unconditional love very well. To them, it's kind of, here's this person that I can say absolutely unspeakable things to. And I can say no to every single thing she asks me to do. But she's still going to tuck me in at night and give me the Wi-Fi password and buy me my favorite snacks. That's sort of how it works. The social reciprocity is thrown off. So they tend to respond much better to the structure and condition in the home. So the home is really where the issues are, hence the parent training. Then there's social executive functioning, which is really one of the most beautiful things to come out of this neurodiversity movement of the past 10, 15 years, of how we focused on external social skills for years and years and years, and threw kids into social skills groups and lunch bunches. External eye contact. First of all, neurotypicals don't do eye contact very well, and it's very culturally based. And how is eye contact going to help someone make friends and keep friends? And the same with circles of communication, topic maintenance, things that just ended up increasing their social anxiety when they weren't in that structured group anymore, and they were in a fluid social environment. Have you ever met a child that went through years and years and years of social skills groups and ended up making friends and keeping friends outside of that group? Anyone? Exactly. Because isn't that the whole reason to put a kid in a social skills group where they can improve their social life outside of that group? Because we have to focus on social executive functioning, which is perspective-taking skills, the ability to understand the thoughts and feelings you put in others' heads, situational awareness, the ability to stand back and read a room before you enter a social environment, social reciprocity, and social relatedness. So these executive functions, we use them as an opportunity to turn away from all the seductions of the moment, the Fortnite, the Roblox, the Minecraft, the Snapchat, interrupting the class, provoking a classmate, whatever it may be that gets all eyes on me, because most ADHD behaviors need an audience. So they're doing something to get a seduction of the moment, to get a dopamine rush, but we're turning away, and instead of a brain that just does plan A, plan A, plan A, we're skipping and moving to plan B. So really what this is all about, what I want all of you to go home tonight thinking about, is right now my child with executive dysfunction is highly prompt dependent. He or she requires someone else to be their executive functioning system for them. We need to fade from prompt dependence to independence. And how do we do that? We follow the basic prompt hierarchy, from dependence of maximum prompting to moderate prompting to mild prompting. Because most ADHD parents get stuck in the trap of verbal prompt, verbal prompt, verbal prompt, verbal prompt, verbal prompt. And the number one rule of all of ADHD parent training is use 90% less language. ADHD parents tend to talk too much, prompt too much, verbal prompts. But when the child has ADHD, not attention deficit disorder, it's really negative attention stimulation disorder. Their brains are hardwired for screens and conflict, screens and conflict. And who better to get conflict from than the unconditional relationship of parents, right? So all of that verbal prompting is inviting an argument, fight, or negotiation. You go to an ADHD child and you say, put your shoes on, you're giving them a fork in the road. They can put their shoes on and hear a quick good job, or not put their shoes on and have you chase them around for 3 hours. Which one are they going to pick? And most ADHD parents think, I need to sit with my child while they're doing their homework to make sure they stay on task. But that's how 10 minutes of homework turns into a 3-hour fight every single time. Okay? So, and here is part of the parent training here. So there's the 4 different parenting styles. ADHD parents, due to the constant dysregulation and negative attention-seeking behaviors, tend to unintentionally fall into the permissive traps, where it's unintentional, it's due to burnout, where we end up overindulging the child to avoid conflict. And then there's neglectful parenting, which of course is criminal. There's authoritarian parenting, which is no good for anybody. But there's authoritative parenting, which is very, very good and evidence-based, but for some reason it sounds too much like authoritarian and it scares parents off. Okay? So permissive parents are ones who tend to follow these things right here. Open access to screens and games. They're just there in the house and parents wonder, why won't my child just do the task? Why won't my child just do what I'm asking? And then me, the parent coach, says, let's flip that question. What are they doing instead of the task? Oh, they're always on their phone. Well, there you have it. There's your answer. You're expecting your child to choose to resist their phone and do their homework, resist their phone and do a chore, resist their phone and go outside with a friend? It's never going to happen. The phone's going to win 100% of the time. Is that truly a skill deficit or an environment problem? Right? So all of these different things right here. Here are some of the things parents end up unintentionally doing that can further inhibit executive functioning development. And here's some of the real evidence-based research that goes against a lot of that social media pseudoscience of connection-seeking behaviors and co-regulation and getting on their level, all these things that get a lot of likes and shares and follows. But here's the actual evidence-based science to show that kids need a hierarchy of relationships. When parents make the child the co-parent, it leads to increased anxiety, right? Kids need consistent leadership, predictable authority, all these different things. Overemphasizing emotional validation, keep your kids stuck. That's a huge thing on Instagram. Always validate their emotions. Why does your kid need you to validate their emotions for them? They already felt it, they knew it was real. It's not a parking ticket, right? What are we doing there? There you go. Don't need to validate their emotions all the time. There you go. Negotiating some things is fine, but constantly seeking approval for your parenting leads to some problems. And it's okay if your kid is upset with you. Exactly. There you go. So another thing that every parent here can figure out is think about your child here. Out of 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, how often are they here? How often is it Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft, scrolling, YouTube, Switch, Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox? How often are they here? Because every parent's goal is for them to be here. But you're never going to get from here to here unless you're able to persevere through here. And a lot of kids today are lacking the resiliency to persevere through the fear zone because they live so much here. Because escaping reality has never been easier. They can escape reality instantly and go right into the virtual world. And we wonder why they have no executive functioning skills, because executive functions are real world skills. If the majority of your life is in the virtual world, how are you going to have real world skills? So like I mentioned earlier, we're currently in an absolutely horrible youth mental health crisis. Diagnosis rates, suicide rates, inpatient rates, school refusal rates. It's really, really scary what's happening to our youth right now, and we all know why it's happening, but the flip side of it is too scary for us to actually face it head on. Okay? And here's a lot of the stats to show exactly what's going on. All these very scary statistics. Major depression amongst teens, since 2010, long before COVID. Okay? Anxiety, depression, sleep issues, withdrawing from family. Anxiety skyrocketing. Mental illness amongst college students. What's the cause? Why is this happening? Why are we seeing this youth mental health crisis? Well, here you have it. Straight from Jonathan Haidt and the Anxious Generation. Social deprivation has absolutely skyrocketed ever since Steve Jobs stood on that stage and said, we're calling it the iPhone. It's not since the pandemic started, it's since the iPhone came out. And there's major dips when Facebook came out, when Instagram came out, when Snapchat came out, all these different things. Okay? Teens engaging in adult activities. We may be happy they're not doing these things, but what's the reason they're not doing it? Because they're at home by themselves, in their room, right? Almost 1 in 10 children never play outside at all. Convicted criminals get more outside time than American children. Okay? So if you guys were to go into a store to buy something for your child, and there was a warning label in the aisle, if you buy this product, it may cause these things. Would you guys buy that for your kid? Yeah. What is the product? An iPhone. There we have it. So kids are now pushing around 8.5 hours of screen time outside of school, plus who knows how much screen time they're having in school, because we decided to give kids laptops in school with unfettered access to the internet. The worst thing to ever happen to education in the history of education was giving kids technology in school and acting like they're going to listen to a lecture about the periodic table when the internet is at their fingers. Absolute horrible mistake, and it's been an unmitigated disaster. Standardized test scores with screen time. So we thought we would give kids screens in school to help prepare them for a tech-filled future. That didn't work. Test scores completely down. So we have all the science here. This brain rot, digital dementia, it's all real. It's not fancy, catchy terms, it's real. The brain gets hurt, negatively impacted, when they're on screens too much. The white matter, the gray matter, the cortical networks, all there. And it creates ADHD symptoms. There's a lot of very powerful doctors and neuropsychs, mostly on the West Coast of America, that have huge waiting lists. And they basically say, I'm not going to evaluate your child for ADHD until your child's gone through a 4-month screen detox. It's not even worth me evaluating them until they've gone 4 months without screens, because screens can cause temporary ADHD symptoms that go away without a detox, Frequent screen use, all these scary things right here. So of course, the science is clear. Screens are horrible for kids and teens and their developing brains and their executive functions. So why is this still such a problem? Number one, most parents are addicted. Let's be honest, most parents are addicted. So in their mind, how am I going to take the phone away from my kid when I'm on it so much? That makes me a hypocrite. So based on that same method of thought, we should be letting our kids drive and vote and drink and gamble, right? Isn't that kind of the same thing? So I'm addicted, I need to let them be addicted as well. And we have to understand there's so much fear involved. We know that screens are causing the youth mental health crisis, but we don't want to admit it because the thought of removing these screens from them is terrifying, because we know they're going to withdraw and they're going to go absolutely insane. And they're going to show the symptoms of an addict withdrawing from a drug, because that's what it is. It's a drug. And the parents will start to say all of these things in their mind, all of these cognitive distortions, to keep them from doing what they know they have to do. If I take the screens away from him, the meltdowns will destroy our relationship. They'll lose all their friends if we cut screens. If I get rid of his phone and his video games and his Snapchat, he'll lose all his friends. He's using them socially. So big tech tells us that phones and video games make them social, smart, and safe. But we now have over 10 years of data. We know it's making them more depressed, more dependent, more dormant, and more antisocial. So this whole concept of screens are social is pure nonsense. Okay? Every family allows screens. We'll be the weird ones. Screens are the future. They need to get used to it. All of these, he'll overindulge later when he finally gets it. All these things to keep you from doing what you know you have to do. So there's a big thing on social media of all behavior is communication, right? I'm sure you all have heard that, right? All behavior is communication. But we only want to believe that when it's warm and fuzzy and makes us feel good. Like, oh, that's a connection-seeking behavior. He just needs more me time and hugs and kisses and me to get on his level. But what about the flip side of it? What about the behaviors you're seeing every single day? If all behavior is communication, what's your child telling you? My brain is not ready for this level of stimulation. I cannot handle these screens. You gave them to me too soon. My brain wasn't ready. No child's going to go up to their mom and say, you know what, take this iPad back. I don't want it anymore. They're going to tell you through their behaviors, my brain can't handle this. When these are available to me, I have no desire to do anything else. And they're telling you these things every single day with their behaviors. Okay? So all of these different things, we brought the screens into their lives. We provide the electricity. We provide the Wi-Fi. And we put it on them. We make them go talk to a therapist for the screen addiction, for the screens we gave them. That's not fair to the kids, right? So we have to figure out experiences. The biggest thing about screens is, like Jonathan Haidt talks about in The Anxious Generation, screens are experience killers. So when a kid gets addicted to Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, Snapchat, how do you know? This kid could be an amazing musician, an amazing artist, an amazing athlete. Could have all the talents in the world, but it lays dormant within them because they're on the screen so often. And that's one of the real heartbreaks of all of it. So executive functions are our ability to imagine how life should be and work towards that image. For those of you who got your kids diagnosed with ADHD, there was a reason why. It was just a bunch of informal checklists and not the kid taking the test themselves. Because there will never be a standardized test to measure executive functioning skills. Because executive functions are the imagination. How are you going to make a test to measure someone's imagination? It's never going to happen. And the only way to build the imagination is to be bored a lot, to go outside and play in nature. Why do you never hear about outdoor play on social media? Why is that not pushed by all the parenting gurus? Because no one makes money when kids play outside. No one's getting paid. No one's getting money in their pockets. But that's what kids need the most. That's what we all did, and we turned out pretty good, right? All these different things. So my 2 books are available back there on the back table right there. There's a Venmo code you can scan and get some of the books, the Parenting Playbook book and the workbook that's not meant for you to sit with your kid and do worksheets with them. It's for you to sit with your spouse and create some structure. I'll make sure everyone gets a copy of this free Tech Grow plan. I'll make sure everyone gets this. It has lots of worksheets to help you create screen time structure in the home. Here's the ADHD Parenting Podcast that you can all listen to, that all the straight talk and none of that fluffy information from social media. And here's all my contact information here. So if you're going to take a picture of one slide, this is the one to do. So you can reach out to me and call me, and I can answer your personal questions. Hope you all enjoyed the presentation. Good stuff, some hard-hitting information. We have some time for some Q&A if there's any questions. Or you guys need to sit and think.
I've got to check my phone.
Yeah, there we go.
What was the name of the site that you said we can go in for the evidence base?
EffectiveChildTherapy.org. Fantastic website.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
Effective child.
Effective Child Therapy with an E. EffectiveChildTherapy.org. Yep.
I've got a question. I understand what you mean when you say that executive function is imagination.
Yep.
And yet, I see this, this abundance of imagination in my daughter.
Yep.
Who definitely struggles with executive function, and it almost seems correlated, like she has trouble with the narrowing of her focus because her mind so full of so many different things all of the time, it strikes me as extremely imaginative and
Yep.
creative. So I guess, could you speak to that?
Yes.
There
So
seems to be like a dichotomy,
yes,
I guess.
so imagination is just not one set thing. You can come up with a million different ideas and be an amazing artist and describe amazing things and those kinds of things. What we're talking about here is actually something called nonverbal working memory. That's the core deficit of ADHD. ADHD is a deficit in nonverbal working memory. So there's your imagination where you can come up with a bunch of different things and overwhelm yourself, sure, but nonverbal working memory is the ability to use your hindsight and your foresight and use it now. That's why it's called working memory. Memories you work with now. So that's why it's a performance disorder. How do I use my hindsight? How do I visualize the future with my imagination and then use it? So she may have an imagination that can come up with a million different things, but executive skill is to execute on it. That's the big thing. So you can, it's imagination is a very broad thing.
Thank you.
Excellent question. Anyone else? How you guys feeling? Good? Who's going to cancel their kid's phone plan when they get home? Anyone? Anyone? Let's all do it together.
Could you actually speak a little bit to that? Because there is a small, and I'm hearing myself and it sounds so defensive and like I'm rationalizing, and I know that there's a part of me that's true. But, so my daughter, she lives on a dead-end street, you know, the last house on a small private road. It is not a neighborhood. There is no option to walk out her door and socialize with people her age. Absent a play date, which we will arrange, and absent, you know, after-school activities like softball and the play that she's in and gymnastics, there really isn't an opportunity for her to connect with her friends except through the screen. And so we kind of give her that. And we'll hear her up in her bedroom and she's on her, you know, tablet and she may be playing Roblox, but she's playing Roblox while playing with her cousin who's an hour away, and they're playing together and they're talking about it and they're saying, oh God, you know, like that guy over there, oh don't talk to him, he's a spammer. You know, and they're and I hesitate to deny her that social outlet. And so is there a middle ground? Is there some place where you can recommend, like, okay, a half hour a day?
Well, at the end of the day, it's all a balance. So we always, number one, we have to do non-preferreds before preferreds. If you give them that half hour of Roblox and then homework and then immediately nighttime routine and then immediately chores, good luck. You're not going from the most stimulating thing to the least stimulating thing directly after. So if they're going to get some screens, they need to have some movement and maybe walk around the block, sit and eat after, whatever it may be. You're not going to, if you expect them to brush their teeth, take a shower, do their homework, read, whatever after screen time, it's going to be a huge mess. They're going to be heavily dysregulated. So at the end of the day, they are not true social experiences. So overall, you have to look at it. Are they having real social experiences outside of that screen time? There's far too many kids where that screen time playing Roblox with people is their only social outlet. And that's really bad, and that's not going to lead to anything. So outside of that half hour, are they having outdoor play? Are they having face-to-face fun? Are they doing sports, activity, getting movement, being outside, those kinds of things? If they're taking care of the non-preferreds, the important essentials of life, then okay, fine. But don't start to convince yourself that that's a real social experience. Even if you hear her talking and it sounds cool, that's doing those things to her brain that the science is telling us. So to us, it's okay. He's talking to her cousin. Her cousin lives far away, and we start to convince ourselves that it's okay, but it isn't. And Roblox is a pretty scary place. It's been in the news a lot recently. Okay? There's never been a safer time in history for a kid to walk 5 miles down the road by themselves and go to the store by themselves. There's a greater chance of them getting struck by lightning 5 times in the same day. But on Roblox, because all the scary people that used to attack kids in the real world are now on Fortnite, Roblox, and Minecraft. That's just a fact. You know, child predators are online because that's where the kids are. So the internet, which we all know is a pretty disgusting place. It is. There's some wild stuff on there. And we all see how people act on social media. We see what people post and people say on Facebook and Instagram. They write some pretty ridiculous things, and people are really mean and very racist and very weird. Okay? So we don't want to expose our kids to that stuff. Roblox is a very, very, very scary place. So be vigilant and don't start to fall for the propaganda. But if she's getting that other time, then it's okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else? Yep.
What about, even though there's cellular phones now, like what about phone time, like just talking to you?
It's fantastic. That's an actual phone. That's phone. Let's be honest. Is this a phone? No, this is a supercomputer. This is a supercomputer. So we always talk about screens. When in reality, it's the internet. It's the internet, right? Like TV's a screen. Was there a youth mental health crisis when TVs were the only screen in the house? No. Were kids trashing their house and cursing at their mom over Mario? No. It was once it got, well, but just in general. It wasn't until that these things got connected to the internet. Why is it always that triangle of death, Fortnite, Roblox, and Minecraft? Why is it always those three? Right? Because those games were created with teams of psychologists using something called persuasive design to make it as addicting as possible. So it's not screens, it's the internet. So if you give them a basic phone and they're using it as a phone, then that's not the internet. Right? Why is EdTech and laptops such an unmitigated disaster? Because they have the internet on them. If we gave every single kid a laptop with no Wi-Fi access, just Microsoft Word, we wouldn't have a problem, and schools wouldn't be in the mess they're in right now. But we give them the internet, and we ask fourth graders to resist YouTube when they should be listening to a lecture on the Civil War. What kid's going to do that? Right? So it's the internet that's the problem. The internet is the most unregulated thing in the history of mankind. And someone had the bright idea, let's give it to kids. There you go. Yep.
So why do you think it's so hard to get these Chromebooks out of the public school system?
Money.
A lot of resistance from teachers.
Money. No, teachers want them gone.
They hate them.
Teachers hate them. It's all admin. It's all the super, because the standardized tests are now on computers, and they've bought into the fact that they need more computer time to do well on standardized tests, because if the standardized tests are high, I get my pension. Correct? That's all it is.
But you can take a test on a computer and not have the computer in your classroom.
I know.
5 days a week.
Correct.
So why can't they?
There's a great book called The Digital Delusion by Dr. Jared Horvath. I recommend you all read it. Fantastic book. It needs to be read. I'm sure you guys all see what's happening in Lower Merion right now. I have a webinar with the Lower Merion School District on Monday. That's a big push. I did a lot of work with the LA United School District that's getting rid of them in LA. I'm making it my life's mission to get rid of EdTech because it is absolutely it's a disaster. In the district my daughter's in, Trendifer and Easttown, they're going to give her an iPad in kindergarten, and I'm going to smash it.
Are you getting a lot of resistance other than evasive resistance? Is the tide turning at all?
Yeah, the tide is definitely turning because the evidence is so overwhelming. So it's only a matter of time. But some of these schools are millions and millions of dollars in debt because of the computers they bought. So they feel like they need to use it. But it's a mess. It's a joke.
There's at least one European country, right?
Sweden and Finland are always very far ahead of the curve in education because they took all the research we did here in America on how kids learn. We ignored it. They took it and followed it. And now they have the best work-life balance. Kids love school. They don't have half the problems we have. They have project-based learning, community-based learning. Kids don't take a standardized test until 12th grade. And 98% of the students take optional classes after they graduate, where they just say, hey, you want to take more classes for fun? 98% say yes. In America, it'd be 0. There you have it, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Okay? We're going to make the change. We're going to make the change. But start thinking about the screens. Think about the screens and make the right choice. Your kid will thank you. I've never met a single child in my life, in all my years of doing this work, I have never worked with a single child that had screens removed and lost a friend. They all vastly improved socially, every single time.